Welcome to my video on PowerPoint tips. I'm going to take you through some really basic tips and tricks. So of course, once you've opened up a PowerPoint, you're going to want to go to the Design tab, and that's where you can find the different templates, if there's one you like there. Or if you have one saved somewhere else on your computer, this little button here will provide you with a drop-down option where you can choose a template from somewhere else on your computer. This design ribbon is also where you can choose the slide size. So if you click here, it will let you choose widescreen or regular. And the other thing to know about is this design ideas option. If you click this, along the right side, you'll get a bunch of options for layouts. Important to remember that these are just suggestions and it doesn't really know what you want from your presentation. And you can also edit these slide suggestions that they provide for you. Here are some other good basic tips. You want your PowerPoint to appear organized and easy to look at. We'll talk about some details about that. It should be consistent throughout. That means the font and the bullets should ideally be consistent from one slide to the next. Remember that this is a visual aid for your presentation. It's not a script. If you need script, you can use the notes section at the bottom of your PowerPoint, and when you're playing in presentation mode, you should be able to see those notes, or you can print out your notes and use them. And then there's the 5-5-5 rule. We'll take a look at that. Okay, we're going to look at the 5-5-5 rule. Now, important to know, there are many different permutations and combinations out there. None of them are exactly gospel, but they're good guidelines to keep in mind. And this particular one says no more than 5 words per line of text, no more than 5 lines of text per slide, and no more than 5 text-heavy slides in a row. So the punchline is, don't make your PowerPoint slides a whole pile of text. And if you absolutely have to, don't do it very often. Here's an example of a revamp of a text-heavy slide into a less text-heavy version of the slide, where I've also included a photo that speaks to some of the content and supports the content of the slide. So you can see that sometimes less is more, because nobody's reading that text on that first slide. People often ask about font size, and my thought on that is don't get too hung up on exact font size, because as you can see here, a 28 is not a 28 is not necessarily a 28, because the actual fonts are different. So the number doesn't necessarily mean much. It's more about how your layout is on your page and what your presentation situation is going to look like. If you stick to not putting too many words on your page, then you're going to end up making them plenty big so that you can see them anyway, because you're not cramming a whole pile of text on. And then you also need to consider where it's being viewed. So in the first picture, we have a massive screen and 4 people around it. The second picture, we have a smaller screen with 4 people around it. If those people were all looking at just their little laptop, then things are going to get even smaller yet. But if you basically stick with making things visible and minimizing the amount of text that you have on, you're probably going to end up making it plenty large to be able to be seen. A couple other text tips. Use bolding for emphasis. Underlining and multicolored text can be distracting rather than enhancing, although there can be a place for it, but don't make it your go-to. Italics can be hard to read, and the use of all caps is typically yelling. Unless you have a reason to be yelling, stick with regular text. Really important too to embrace the space. By embrace the space, I mean white space. So things to think about. You want equal margins-ish around all the outsides of your slide. So there should be a border on your slide and things not cramming up against the outer walls. And it should be approximately equal, maybe top and bottom, side to side, or all of the above. Text should almost always be left justified, because that's how people read. If it's standalone text and you want to center it, that's different. But a body of text or entire bullets should not be center justified. And if you need to use more slides rather than cramming content into one slide, that's far superior. One basic concept per slide is the best way to go anyway. Another thing that you have to watch out for is fancy transitions and animations. So although it can be very tempting to put in all these different types of animations, it can also be super distracting. So pick an animation make that the one that you use, because this kind of thing where every single thing comes in a different way comes off juvenile. Likewise, transitions from slide to slide. It can be so tempting to have a fancy transition, but again, it can be just a little bit too much. Don't do this. Pick a picture or two that makes your point and feature it prominently, unless of course the point you're trying to make is this is what chaos looks like. Try not to mix clip art and photos. Space items out and have them be about the same dimensions and in line with each other rather than randomly scattered about. To top off the chaos of this slide, they have a busy background and fancy fonts. All of these things make this slide a nightmare to look at. If you have a picture that fits with your content, use it, but not like a postage stamp. Make sure that pictures are large enough to see. As an aside from the photo issue, I can't help but mention, looking at this example, that you should keep your titles short. And although going too flashy can be a bad thing, it's nice to have a little bit of color and contrast, rather than just black text on white background. Let's take a look at this slide, for example. The content here is overlapping the template design, which makes it look sloppy. The borders around the pictures and around the edges are irregular, and some of the text is center justified and some of it's left justified. I've just done a quick fix on this slide to clean it up a little bit. It's not high tech, it's just easier to follow and more organized looking. And don't be afraid to use large photos. The slide on the left side here looks pretty good, it's a nice big photo, but you don't always have to keep the border of the PowerPoint template in place. Sometimes just if you don't have a lot of text, make the photo your entire slide. It's kind of nice and refreshing. Try to use high resolution images rather than low resolution images, or at least images that are high enough resolution that they don't look fuzzy. Mind the aspect ratio. Things that are round should stay round. People should stay their normal dimensions. If you want to put a picture in and change the size or the dimensions of it, click on the photo, and up here you'll get this picture format bar. Go to crop, choose crop, and then you can move the sides in and make it the dimensions you want it to be. You could also crop to shape, so if you wanted it to be a circle frame, you can do that. If you want to move the picture around within that circle frame, choose crop again, and then you can move it rather than grabbing the sides of the circle. That's the way to do that. If you just resize a photo by making it bigger or smaller and you don't want to actually crop it, make sure you only move the picture by these corners. That will keep the aspect ratio the same. If it's too wide and you try to squish the picture in by moving it from the sides, that's not actually the shape of that dog's face. So don't do that. Either make it bigger or smaller by using the corner, or crop it using the cropping tool under the picture format bar. One last tip about images. Try to use images that do not contain a watermark. Using pictures with watermarks basically says I stole this picture off the internet. So that concludes my PowerPoint basics, tips and tricks. Keep text to a minimum. Use images that enhance rather than distract. Be consistent with font and bullets. White space is good. And keep it simple. Those are sort of my broadest tips summarized.